Hello and welcome to the Cuyamungue Institute, our Q&A Conversation for Exploration series. I'm Paul Robert, the Executive Director and President of the Institute, along with my wife, Laura Lee, the Director of Research, Education, and Outreach, and on behalf of our Board of Directors, advisors, volunteers, and supporting members, we want to thank you for joining us today. The Cuyamungue Institute is an independent, nonprofit research organization committed to researching consciousness and the human experience following the footsteps of our founder, anthropologist, Dr. Felicitas Goodman. And as an educational institution, we take this as an open approach and invite scholars in related fields to help broaden the scope of our own work and exploration. And that's why we call this Conversation for Exploration. On these Sunday discussions, we've had a full spectrum of topics, from neuroscience, anthropology, archaeology, archaeoastronomy, eco-spirituality, ecology, philosophy, psychology, mythology, shamanism. It goes on and on and on. From what do you always say? From the arts to the sciences, and so much more. So visit our website at CuyamungueInstitute.com. All of our presentations are free, and as a nonprofit, we invite you to become a supporting member. And of course, we want to thank you, the community members who continue to support the mission of the Cuyamungue Institute. Today, we continue our ongoing research and discussion into the working of the brain, defining consciousness, and what we continue to learn from the field of neuroscience. But today we have a researcher, a professor, a doctor who's traveled the world lecturing on the sleep medicine, the neurophysiological aspect of sleep. But as a twist, we met Geert as a friend, and later we adopted him as a cousin. Let me show you a quick personal story before we begin. It all started with a good friend, Barbara Cox. We had been discussing with her for some time to come down and visit us at the Institute in Santa Fe, and when can she come down and spend some time? And she let us know that her cousin from Germany was coming. He was coming to the U.S. as a lecturer, doing some presentations, but he also wanted to take some personal time to visit with her and travel. And she said, could I bring my cousin with me?
Oh, yeah.
Down to the Institute. So who is he? Well, he's a researcher into sleep disorders, and he presents around the world. He's a psychiatrist, neurologist.
Yeah.
And so
sounds like a dream sleep lab.
Sounds like the kind of guy we'd want to meet, sure. So we said, come on down. Of course, there was a little bit of is he going to be some kind of stuffy academic kind of science guy? Is he going to be fun? And is he going to enjoy what we do as an institute? Because we're pushing the envelope when we start talking about trance states. Well, as soon as they arrived, there's this generous, excited person, fun, walking through the door. Totally the opposite of a stuffy academic science guy. And let's face it, New Mexico is a magical, enchanting place. And it was so fun to see New Mexico fresh through the eyes of a first-time visitor, and his fascination with the beauties and the colors and the mountains and the sunsets and the sunrises. It was really inspiring. And then we had that curiosity of that discussion and curiosity about trance states and asking him questions, and he was interested in what we were doing. And so we said, well, let's do some practices of the ecstatic trance postures and see what you think. And anyway, in a very short time, I just was calling him Cuz. I adopted him as my cousin, and we dropped everything that we were doing around the Institute and said, let's go also be tourists with these guys. Let's go look at the world of New Mexico through their eyes and have these discussions while we're traveling around. So it was really fun, and it was really exciting.
Well, running a dream sleep lab, Geert told us that he was interested in lucid dreaming, and why wouldn't you be? He and many of his colleagues, if you're studying sleep and dreams, wouldn't you want to get inside one and take a look? Mm-hmm. And so we said, well, we have another way. Come and join us in our practice. And then we sat him down and we said, and I quote you widely, Geert, as a neurologist, as someone who studies the brain, how do you see our practice? And he said something really interesting. He framed it in such an interesting way. He said, the centers that support the waking state, those remain on. You know that you're fully awake here. But some, but not all of the centers that support the dream state, those flip on as well. And I don't know how. It must be something with the ritual. These ancient peoples were very wise in this. But here you've got both sleeping and dreaming centers communicating.
Right.
This is a waking state, a hybrid state of the waking dream. And I thought that's a perfect,
Let
perfect
me put him on
description.
screen and we can continue.
And so, yeah,
Hi, Garrett.
I get it.
Hi, Laura. Hi, Paul.
So we appreciate an
Nice to see
offer.
you. Nice to see you. Lovely.
Nice to
Nice to
see you
see
too.
you.
Yes.
So we appreciate, Garrett, that as the director of a dream sleep lab, you were traveling the world lecturing, and now you've retired, and you're still traveling the world lecturing. And we appreciate that you take time out to come and visit us and also be with us here today. So a very warm welcome. And
Thank you.
yeah, it's always a joy to sit and talk with you. Here you are with so much knowledge, looking at a third of the time that we spend sleeping. We don't really understand that process. We don't understand the dynamic very well, right? We're unconscious most of the time in our
That's
sleep.
the idea, yeah.
And so we're also here to hear what you can tell us about this state. It's quite a momentous physiological shift from waking to sleeping. But we still know it's very, very active. We know a lot of energy is burned and used, oxygen in the brain during waking, but it also is during sleeping. It's a very active state. And so it'll be interesting to know what you found out about it, how you've experimented with lucid dreaming. You've done our practice with us, how that compares in your mind, and much, much more.
That's a good
But
start.
first, I want to know about you.
Uh,
How did you get into the field? What drew you to this particular field of study? You're
uh,
like a
well,
mystery, don't you?
actually, I was trying to become a psychoanalyst, and I was lying down at the couch for about 5 years when I decided, okay, this is not getting me any further. So I got into intensive care medicine in neurology. For 4 years, I ran an intensive care ward, and then I thought, okay, I'm getting to be at an age where I should decide where I will go in the future. And it was not psychoanalysis anymore. I really got interested in medicine. So I got an offer to take a job in a small neurological clinic here in the middle of Germany, south of Kassel, or north of Frankfurt, probably better known. And I started there out as just a neurologist and psychiatrist. And then I discovered they had a sleep lab. So I got interested in the sleep lab, and I thought in the beginning, okay, this small town, I'm just going to stay for half a year or no longer, or a year or so, and make my career. And then there was this lay group of narcoleptic patients which had been founded in Schwalmstadt, as it is called. And this was absolutely exciting because these patients experience excessive daytime sleepiness, cataplexies, which is a sudden loss of muscle tone upon emotions, strong emotions, hypnagogic hallucinations, sleep paralysis, fragmented sleep, and many, many other kind of features. So it was an open field. There was just very few research on it from the Japanese and the Americans in Stanford, especially the Stanford Center, which was a primary center for the research in narcolepsy. And so I got interested in that. And then a whole field of sleep medicine suddenly opened up to me for all these things where states of the mind were intermingling, which we call dissociated, where all of a sudden the normal follow-up of wake, non-REM sleep, REM sleep was in a way distorted. So I tried to find out what is behind it, and I explored the patients clinically. We looked at them in the sleep lab, looked what happened at night. We drew blood samples, things like that. And then I got to know a couple of families where it ran in the family. Like one family was, they called it the symptom, the laughing hand. Each time they laughed, the hand dropped down, was always the right hand. And there were 5 members of this large family that was affected. So I thought, this is strange, because
That's
for
a
the
clue.
first
Yeah.
for the first time I was thing that there was something like a unilateral cataplexy, this loss of muscle tone. It didn't affect the whole body. So why should it just affect a part of the body? And this went on and on and on, and it extended into non-REM parasomnias like sleepwalking, sleep terrors, into REM parasomnias, the bridge to Parkinsonism, etc., etc. And well, given the background that I had different trainings in different types of psychotherapy, like cathethymic imaging, like Pearl's psychotherapy, like other psychotherapeutic methods that used dreaming imagery. And this related very much to the point of hallucinations, which I think is probably the wrong expression, because if you have a real hallucination, you would say, okay, this is true, this is my reality. And even if you wake up, you say it's your reality. So what you experience actually is not reality, but it's a pseudo hallucination, because you know exactly upon waking up or changing your state of consciousness that it's not a hallucination, that it's not true.
You're not mistaking it for reality. So similar to a dream, you're inputting from some other source than your eyes, a vision, right? It's
Right.
conjured up, but you know the difference. So we don't call dreams hallucinations. So I agree with you. What other term is there? What's a better term? Vision? What's a better term for that?
Imaging. I think it's imagery. Imagery
Yeah.
is much better. Yeah. Any questions to that?
No, but
So you got into this because then here suddenly it posed a mystery. What did you find out about some of these sleep disorders that ran in family? Was there a genetic? Was there something going on in the household? Was it you said there was a bridge to Parkinson's with some of the sleep disorders? There's neurological implications for not sleeping well. What were you discovering? What were some of the
No,
answers?
it was in the narcoleptic patient. It was and not. It's not genetics. Part of it, maybe it is part of it. It's genetics, but the more the discovery or research went on, the more we found out that it's neuroimmunological process that affects the brain, and this changes the brain states. And for example, in narcolepsy, it's a loss of the orexins, neuropeptide that is produced in the dorsolateral hypothalamus. So these people lack it. And whereas other people, like healthy people, can have these, I still call it hypnagogic hallucination because it's the term that's being used worldwide still. And healthy persons can have it. So this is quite interesting. So there are different mechanisms to it. And the loss of orexins explains it in narcoleptic patients, but not in normal healthy persons. And also it doesn't explain why, for example, sleepwalkers dream. This is very interesting to me. Normally you say, okay, sleepwalkers, they don't dream because they don't recall that something happened to them during the night, that they sleepwalk. They have no consciousness for that. But then if you change from one state to another, like from non-REM to REM or from REM to wake, REM means rapid eye movement sleep, where you are dreaming. When you change from one state to another, this is called arousal. So if you have a state transition, which doesn't change so much the state itself, where you have EEG patterns that look more like, let's say, REM to wake, then you may recall dreams. So it was quite interesting to look at these dreams, and the dreams of the sleepwalkers were quite different from the vivid hallucinatory-like, or what people perceived it as hallucinatory-like dreams the narcoleptics have. And then you have another state, the transition, for example, from non-REM to REM, and all of a sudden in the pre-Parkinson patients, you have this state of consciousness where REM sleep is intruded by muscle activity. Normally in rapid eye movement sleep during dream-like sleep, you don't have muscle activity. And all of a sudden, these people with neurodegenerations do have muscle activity in their dreams. And all of a sudden, they start having jerky movements during their dreams. They act out certain dreams, and these dreams are astonishingly mainly aggressive, of the aggressive type. Maybe a bit different with sex differences, like women may have less aggressive dream contents than men, but still they do have these dreams, and they, for example, they beat their partner because they feel in their dreams they are being aggressed by someone, and so they try to act it out against their partner, not realizing it's their partner who they are hitting. And you have it in the papers quite often, probably in the USA as well, I know. So
it can even affect the quality of the content of the dreams, you're saying?
yes, it does. It does. It's a unique content of the dreams. It's rarely about eating or sexual assaults or something like that. It's mainly aggressive, hitting, being aggressed by someone, trying to fight them back, things like that.
Way. So rapid eye movement, it's almost as though one might presume that the eye is scanning, right? The eye is, it's during dreaming that you have the rapid eye movement. It's almost like your eye is scanning the field in front of you. Is there an association with that? I mean, our eyes are very active when we're awake, and we're scanning what's in front of us.
Yes.
Is that, what's the relationship there? With
the REM state is very active state. We say that it's almost as active also for processing memory as the wake state. So a colleague of mine in Paris, Isabelle Arnulf, she looked at eye movements during REM sleep behavior disorder. This is what the pre-Parkinson symptom is called, and where people act out their dreams. And she found that they are following their dreams with the eyes.
Gotcha. Okay. And you're mentioning Parkinson's. What is the relationship between a sleep disorder and Parkinson's? You've mentioned it a couple times.
Well, the Parkinson's affects the brain. It starts out in the brain stem. Maybe it starts out already in the guts by an infection or by nasal infection, and it goes directly to the brain, or from the guts to the brain. And so it's a neurodegenerative process that comes up the brain stem to the cortex, to the biggest part of the brain, the newer part, as we say, of the brain. So it starts out in the brain stem, in the old system of the brain, in the old part of the brain, and it changes the arousal system. This means it changes the processing of the incoming and outgoing information, the information from your brain and the incoming information from the periphery. And it is associated with a neurodegenerative process, which we can see in misfolded proteins, which are called the alpha-synucleins. And the alpha-synucleins start to accumulate way before we can see any change in MRI or in PET scans, in certain PET scans of Parkinson's disease. So it's quite interesting in this way, like by biopsies, skin biopsies, etc. One finds out that alpha-synuclein accumulates very early.
In your skin? It shows up in your skin?
No, you can. It's in every cell.
Every cell. Oh, so the skin's very accessible. Oh
Okay.
my
Yeah.
gosh.
You
Not
you
just the
can
brain, it's
take it
everywhere.
from the thyroid. You can take it from the thyroid, but it's also in the brain.
And you're saying
It's
an infection can start this? So it. Oh my gosh!
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
I'm reading that even some cancers can be from an infection. Like a lot of disease now we're finding can start with an invading what virus, bacteria, whatever. Is that
yeah,
true? Yeah.
yeah. This
Yeah.
is very true. And in animal experiments, it could be found that, for example, you can infect animals, and with certain trans infections nasally and by changing the guts, you can start this process of neurodegeneration.
I think they're finding even looking at genetics in our DNA and the history, and in animals as well, some genes have been given us by certain viral infections in certain species, right? So, I mean, you can even show up in the genetic record
It
through the changing
can show in the
chromosomes from.
genetic records, and you have families that have a genetic disposition that is clear, and you find it throughout the families. And then there are other forms of Parkinsonism and neurodegeneration where you find a multitude of genes, and you have the same phenotype, but a different genetic background. So genetics is not all; it's also epigenetics. What is around the genetics? Okay.
Right. What causes a certain gene to express in a certain way, right? That's
Yeah.
also a big
Yeah.
part of it. Okay. So, and tell us about your forays into lucid dreaming, because when we first met you, you were saying that you were doing some experiments, you and several colleagues, that you wanted to get inside the whole dreaming process to take a look. And if you do that consciously, that's called lucid dreaming. There's various techniques. It's spontaneous as well. I've had lucid dreams spontaneously. But what did you find out about that? Just because it's of
Well,
interest to our audience.
actually, it started out very early in my training as in psychotherapy, and it was called cathartic imaging, and it is a relaxation method, something you do also in the Kiva. So you have a relaxation like progressive muscle relaxation. So you get into a different state of consciousness, a different state of mind, and then you imagine like you're on a green pasture, and then somewhere your psychological or other problems will pop up. And if you have someone aggressing you, or if you have something that makes you very anxious, um, your guide, your psychotherapist tells you, okay, here we go, look around you and you will find a shelter, you will find a protection, look at the object. It's something like imagery in terms of behavioral therapy, confronting, but still giving shelter. So this is my experience about it, and what I did actually, coming from the Minneapolis group. They did behavior therapy on sleepwalkers and REM sleep behavior disorder and other disorders. So I used that for sleepwalkers, and like I was trying to put them into a state of relaxation, a sleep, so-called sleep-like state.
They're
And
still conscious, but also kind of the from imagery,
right,
projection of imagery
but
to the
you are
dream.
floating. You are in a resting
Ah.
state. You are in a resting state, and then you have them act upon a peripheral stimulus. The peripheral stimulus is like I hear myself screaming. When I hear myself screaming, I turn around in bed and go on sleeping. Or if my feet
Like you're
touch the
setting up an auto
ground.
suggestion. Yeah. Is
Yeah,
that auto
no,
suggestion?
it's autosensory. It's a sensory input. You
Okay.
act to a sensory input. So I mean, you're still in a non-REM sleep, and sleepwalking comes out of deep slow wave sleep normally. It can come out of lighter sleep as well, and then this is when you sometimes when you wake awoken, you still recall dreams. So actually, you are training yourself to expand your mind to act to a sensory input. Like if you have something, a bee in your bedroom, and you kind of try to push it away, even though you're sleeping. And in the morning, if I would ask you, you wouldn't recall that you did it. You just know there was something that night.
Okay, so you're a psychiatrist and a neurologist and a sleep doctor, so you get to employ these kinds of techniques, right? You can actually sit down with somebody and guide them through an exercise like this, and then you're noting certain things that are going on. Was it successful? What happened with these kinds
Well,
of exercises?
it depended on the conviction of the people. If people were not convinced, I mean, they said, "Oh, what is he doing? This is something strange," And those people who were convinced, they went on, and it worked quite well. It didn't work every night, but if they went on practicing, it was terrific in children, absolutely terrific. I always took the mothers or the fathers with me. I practiced it with the fathers, and then the children had no interest normally to practice it. And the mothers who were co-sleeping then for a couple of nights said this input gave this verbal input and stopped. So it was quite, I was quite impressed actually that it worked. Or the wives of husbands who were hitting around at night could do it without touching the husband.
You mentioned, and here's the question: how do we engineer waking up and remembering more of our dreams?
Oh, yeah.
Because sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. What's the difference? You mentioned about going from slow or lighter REM. It's easier to recall a dream, or is there a certain moment in the sleep cycle when you wake up that it's easier to recall a dream? How can we engineer recalling our dreams more readily?
Normally, we can recall our dreams if we wake up from REM sleep. And this
He's right in the
normally
middle of one.
happens when you have the time to wake up slowly. REM sleep is more prevalent in the morning. You start the sleep with slow wave sleep. You change after about 1 hour and 10 minutes to REM sleep, and then it cycles back and forth. And in the first third of the night, you have more slow wave sleep. In the last part of the night, you have more REM sleep. So if you have the chance not to wake up with your alarm clock, but to wake up voluntarily, and you are still you still have that link to this consciousness. After, then you recall. If you, for example, wake up immediately and your mind is set on work, on children, household, whatever you have to do, then it's gone. It's each sleep stage kind of shuts off a neuronal circuit. So this circuit is done. And it's like closing a door, and you don't know what's going on behind the door. And you don't have any memory for that.
So you try to
So you
leave
need
those
some
doors
time.
open. Shifting from one to the other, you're trying to leave that door open,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you can recall. So no
You
wonder
can recall for a
engineering.
couple of minutes because it still prevails. It still prevails. So I don't think I put that into my slides. Normally, like when we wake up, our blood runs from the brainstem and slowly goes to the frontal brain, and the frontal brain is the brain of the consciousness. So it takes some time until we go into consciousness. And of course, we are forced by our work schedules to wake up and, oh, here I am, and I have to go on and to move, and I have to make my breakfast, and then I have to do this and that. So your mind is set up totally different, and you're not into training to recall your dreams. And some anthropologists said in the early phase of sleep medicine, they said, well, the tribal people, they sat in the mornings and they exchanged their dreams. And this made them a cultural and spiritual community.
Right.
And this is what is lacking in our Western societies, that we don't exchange our let's say, a part of our consciousness that is not accessible to our explorative or scientific
Well
thinking.
said.
So in a
That's
culture that does that, you would, the dreams come forward because you are going to speak them, you're going to write them down. In our case, that helps us remember dreams. You're actually telling your body, I am here to receive the dream. I want to know about the dream. I'm honoring and respecting the dream. I'm ready. Here's my dream journal. So I think that otherwise the body goes, well, let's shift into what you want to do. You want to be awake and active. Let's go shift over here, right? You want to remember your dream. Well, stay in this state for a little bit. That's interesting. Okay, sunlight. Does sunlight, if you are in a room waking up and the sunlight hits you, does that not serve as an alarm clock? Is the light hitting you, activating, hello, wake up? It serves as an alarm clock. Is it better to be in a darkened room if you really want to wake up on your own volition? Your body says, okay, enough sleep, time to wake up. How does that?
I think if you want to keep on sleeping and if you want to erase all surroundings or the influence of your surroundings, of your environment, like noise, like whatever other things, your mind is more in a resting state.
One of these.
It can
Yeah.
focus much more. Yeah, yeah. And you can focus much more on what is happening inside of you. So, and we are not used to train ourselves to look inside ourselves and to take it for serious what happens in our dreams. Most people say, "Oh, dreams are foam." We say in German, "Dreams are foam, nothing but foam. You can't grab it. It's nothing essential, or it's all strange. So why should I care to understand what I do?" But sometimes it's essential, because when you go more or less into your dreams, you find out they relate to your everyday life and to your background.
Okay, why do we dream? Why in the beginning part of the day or beginning part of the night, you're saying that there's less dream? Your body, your brain's really doing what? It's kind of cleaning house. It's kind of resetting the neurology. There's a lot of activity. There's sleep is medicine. So what goes on in the brain, the housekeeping of the brain in the beginning of the night, and then why are we dreaming? It's purposeful, right? Evolution, nature, it's purposeful. So there must be some, as you're saying, something beneficial going on for us to dream. What are the two?
The mechanics.
Yeah.
Well, let's put it that way. If you work out very hard, you need a recovery, a physical recovery, and we can explain why the muscles need to relax and that they need to refill with energy, metabolic stuff, and chloride or whatever, And so what we do when sleeping is we do a recovery of the brain, and we reset our brain. Let's take, for example, a sleep issue, which many people are affected by, restless leg syndrome. Restless leg syndrome starts in the evening, and you have this tingling sensation. You have to move your legs. It disturbs your sleep. And why is it so? Because dopamine depletes throughout the daytime. And then you have to refill your dopamine during sleep time. And it starts and it ends when around 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock, your dopamine is at a normal level again. So we have to have this for all the neurotransmitters, adrenaline, serotonin, whatever. There are many things, So we have to kind of refresh ourselves, and we have to go through also a memory restoration. Like all the inputs that we have are transported by slow wave sleep to the hippocampus. From the hippocampus, there is short-term memory consolidation, and then further on by early gene production and changes of thousands of genes. We confirm our memory, or say we throw out old memory, and then it goes to the frontal brain, and it's genetically this memory implemented in our dendritic spines. So
wow.
we think that each memory that has been consolidated stays with us lifelong, because it's a genetic imprint, which
Oh
is
my
in the
gosh.
DNA of the spines. So
Oh my
sleep
gosh.
also relates very, very much to memory and memory consolidation. And of course, if you have a sleep problem and if you accumulate sleep debt, or the other way around, for years and years, if you have too little sleep, like if you sleep less than 5 or 4 hours or so, you accumulate, you don't clean your brain from these misfolded proteins. We have a lymphatic system in the brain. It's called the glymphatic system. And this glymphatic system runs high only during sleep. It's low in the daytime.
Oh wow.
So if you don't sleep enough, your glymphatic sleep doesn't do the clearance of all these misfolded proteins like tau, like amyloid in the demented people, or alpha-synuclein in those people with Parkinson's disease or other neurodegenerative disease. So this is why
This is the housekeeping. So there's actual molecules, debris, right?
yeah,
It just wants to come and wash through and
it's a
remove it.
metabolic system. Come on, it's a
Yeah.
metabolic system in the brain, and it's a
Wow.
permanent change.
Wow. Okay. Boy. So it's busy. The brain has a lot to do
The
at
brain
night.
is very, very busy, and the most active state is the REM state,
Mm-hmm.
because in the REM state you finally transport your memories towards
So
the frontal
there's
brain.
a chemical, there's a genetic imprint of memories. I mean, memories are an experience, right? You're experiencing during the day. So now I have a memory or my own interpretation of it. And it's almost like I'm going to see my inner psychiatrist, right? And that gets processed, right? It's sorted through. Let's comb it through and make it nice little packets and put it away. In a sense, is that that's what's
Yeah,
happening?
yeah,
So it's
certainly,
going from
certainly.
consciousness, the experience, to a chemical and a physiological stuff, right? There's that relationship there.
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
And
Wow.
it actually it influences very much also your neurotransmitters. Like someone just put
What
on
fires in the
sugar
brain?
medication, something like that, And if
Yeah.
you're, for example, if you're taking serotonergic medications, you do a lot to your motor system. You do a lot to your mood. So it changes very much, and also serotonin influences very much the sleep-wake cycle. And many medications do influence the sleep-wake cycle, not always to the best. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
look out which medication do I prescribe to which patient, are his comorbid diseases, and how can it affect in a positive way this patient, and how do I not disturb his sleep, like well, if you're taking beta adrenergic medication against your, for example, hypertension or asthma or whatever, and if you take it at night, it increases your arousal and it disturbs your sleep, because you're always waking up, or not necessarily from to be really awake, but to change sleep stages to a lighter sleep stage and not having REM sleep or something like.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so other sleep, there's medications to help you sleep. Are those disturbing the biochemistry of the sleep? I mean, they're doing something to ask you to sleep, but is it the right kind of sleep? And does it depend on the patient? Would it be better to do some natural kind of sleep aids?
Hypnosis or something
Or,
else.
yes, some kind of lifestyle to get enough sleep? I mean,
Well, I had many patients coming up with these smart watches and saying, "Hey, doctor, I don't have enough slow wave sleep." And I said, "Come on, this is just actimetry. It's measuring the movements of your hand, of your left or of your right hand, it doesn't register sleep. Though if you have a good sensitive instrument, an actimeter, it can tell you when you're awake and when you're asleep, because in sleep you don't move that much.
Mm-hmm.
So for insomniac patient, it's quite good. It's okay, but it doesn't tell you anything about REM sleep or sleep depths. For REM sleep, you need to have rapid eye movement, no muscle tone. Muscle tone is gone, and you have your autonomic system is totally in disbalance. For even in young patients, for example, they can have hypertension during REM sleep. And this is why it's REM sleep in the morning, much REM sleep in the morning is very dangerous to vulnerable people. And this is why so many heart infarctions or strokes are happening in the morning.
But the body says, let's take you offline in terms of movement, right? There's a kind of a sleep paralysis because you might be acting out your dreams and it could be dangerous. Like you said, hitting your
right.
So that's really a safety mechanism for the body. Do all your movement inside your dream, right? Body's still.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Traditional idea of 8 hours a night, is that still the tradition? Is that the science that we need to have?
Or is it a bell curve where some people need some less?
Well, it's we have some good studies that were exploratory studies that have been done throughout Europe and the United States by the Stanford group. And they had a real detailed questionnaire, which was kind of splitting in between different ICD, International Classification of Diseases, disorders. And they did it for sleep disorders in more than 50,000 people. And it showed for Western Europe, for example, a mid sleep time of 7 hours, 0.18 or 12, something like that. And then, of course, it's a bell-shaped curve. And you must be aware that some people really genetically have a long sleep and others have a short sleep. And so you must realize if they're short sleepers or long sleepers, but the average should be 7 hours. In our society, we sleep much less due to occupational things or stress or whatever, TV, what have you. And so we sleep less during the week time and lots more during weekend, or we try to catch up with sleep.
Your body just says, it's interesting that when you're really, really busy and you're going full out for days at a time, when it stops, your body just collapses, right? And you just sleep. It's like I need to sleep. It's an interesting cycle. Okay, I have a cycle that I have to ask you about. So this has been going on, and I know a lot of other people have this because I've talked to them. In the middle of the night, 3 a.m., like on the button, I'm just awake. And it's a delicious kind of awakeness. It's just natural, wake up, and it feels like the whole universe is right there at my fingertips. I feel very expansive. It's a very mystical state. It's just beautiful. It's just like big thinking. And then I fall asleep after a while, but then I tend to sleep later in the morning, much later than you. You're up before the crack of dawn. He just is naturally awake and, like roaring to go. He's either off or on, right? Full on or full off. But I have a very different, biorhythm. And that 3 a.m., it just, I can't help it, no matter what I do. But I've learned not to fight it. I've learned to enjoy it. I mean, it's
good.
just
Otherwise, you would be an insomniac patient.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
If you would suffer from it.
Why so many people? The 3 a.m. just seems to be that magical time.
Well, it's not the time itself, but it's a self-sustaining cycle, which starts with worries, and then you have a longer sleep latency. You have difficulties falling asleep. Then you're starting to ruminate. Then you're starting to have a fragmented sleep because you always wake up. And then you start to worry the next day, oh, what am I going to do if I don't wake up again at 3 o'clock at night? And
I'm not worried about it.
No, you say it's
no, it's not about you. It's not about you, but it's about being insomniac. So it's a vicious cycle. It's a vicious cycle. And each time you awake, you're anxious and your heart rate goes up. You have less slow wave sleep. You have fragmented REM sleep, and you feel exhausted during the daytime, but still you cannot sleep. And some people then have this recovery sleep where they have it for 5 days, just sleep very badly, and then have a 1 day of recovery. And some just say, I cannot sleep at all. And if you look at the sleep logs, normally they sleep longer than they think, but their mind is trained to feel that their sleep is just 3 hours. Instead, they really sleep for 5 hours, for example. But they realize only wakefulness. They don't experience sleep anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, the other thing I wanted to follow up on is that the tradition of being married and sleeping together, and I mean sleeping together, and of course we had different biorhythms, so we have to be careful about disturbing the other person and disturbing their sleep, being respectful of that, but yet allowing the independence of how, like Laura just mentioned, she has a different sleep cycle than I do, but we try to be respectful that we're not disturbing each other in that cycle. I'm up early, she's up at 3.
Well, people ask us, how can you be so happily together 24/7? And I'm like, he gets up at the crack of dawn, I get up later. He goes to bed really early, I stay up later.
Yeah.
Right? So we have our alone time.
Right. But that's a challenge for couples.
Yeah.
So yeah, of course. But as you said, you are respectful. You are used to each other's sleep. You are trained to know he's
protect each other.
He's sleeping well. He's sleeping like a log. So you know it and you accept it. If you wouldn't accept it and you would be angry, oh, why is he sleeping much better than I? Then you have a problem, and then your insomnia, your sleep problem is getting worse and worse and worse.
I see.
And you get really angry at your husband, and this is when you should get up and go to, after some while, to a different bedroom.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant a sleep lab.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
Your dog help.
A marriage counselor. That's another whole discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other question is, as we age, it seems like elderly people report that they don't sleep as well.
Or as much.
Is that true?
Yeah.
There seems to be that report that people can't sleep as well. They don't have that same quality as you watch a baby can be, you can have a baby in your arm and moving from the car to the house, and the baby just sleeps through everything. Whereas as we get older, someone drops a pin in the floor and he can't sleep all of a sudden.
So sleep changes with age.
Yeah.
As we age beyond 60, you have less, or even when you were aging already in the 40s or 50s, you get less REM sleep and you get less slow wave sleep. And there are several causes for it. For example, your lenses are changing and they're degenerating, and they don't let through the spectrum of light that is needed to initiate our circadian rhythm. You said biorhythm. I never use that word because there's no biorhythm. It's circadian. We call it circadian during 24 hours.
Earth clock. Okay.
Yeah. So the light doesn't affect us as much, and the inner clocks are kind of changed towards 1 hour later falling asleep. And what people do, for example, and these were the first studies in senior homes, is people are put to bed at 6 o'clock at night after having their lunch, the dinner, and so they're not exposed. They're only exposed to very little light, to very few Kelvin. So what you have to do is to expose them in the morning to bright light that has a spectrum of the sun, which is blue light. And the funny thing about it is the Nobel Prize for these researchers that found out about melanopsin, which was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, was given 20 years after their discovery.
Because we didn't know how important it was at the time.
I see. Yeah.
So you're also describing the protocol for SAD, seasonal affective disorder, which is to have, I know a lot of Seattleites, right?
Yeah.
Who needed the bright light in the morning to get going. kind of like the snake needs the sunlight to warm up and get going, right? There was something about
Needs the
getting
temperature.
charged up
Yeah.
with full spectrum light or sunlight. Couldn't see it in Seattle all the time, so you had to have artificial full spectrum. But that's interesting. So you look at our ancestors who maybe had a campfire at night, maybe had a little torch at night, and really had to get out there in the day, right, to do their thing. And you look at us with all the artificial light. How do you think that has changed our overall circadian rhythms or affected us in our cycles and our lives from that?
Well, first of all, the ancient people lived a circannual sleep-wake cycle. I mean, that is to say, during fall, sleep was prolonged just a little. They woke up with the rising of the sun and they went to bed with sunset.
Yeah.
And after all, when light was known, it was very little influential to our circadian system because, of course, candlelight or firelight has very, very few Kelvin.
Right.
So, or lux,
Mild
or whatever
effect.
you want to call it. So it doesn't influence our circadian rhythm. So people were sleeping longer in the winter and were sleeping shorter during summertime. But they slept enough because you don't have, except maybe in the northern areas, a complete
Land of
light
midnight sun.
throughout 24 hours. And of course, this regionally, it affected your mood. Like the people in the northern countries more frequently have depressions, as in southern countries or closer to the equator. So this is the geographical region is very influential. And also not only, for example, if you're living in the north or the south, but also the east and the west. So we have, for example, in Europe, a standard time. And but if you wake up in Portugal, is an hour difference to waking up in Berlin. So how can we have the same time? It's strange, you know. We have our time zones. Like when I go to the US, it's for you to go to Seattle. It's 9 hours change of time. So this should be, and this is why it's such an influential discussion for the Europeans. Do we have a standard European time? Do we have a summer time? Should we have a summer time? It's not only ecological or energetically a question, but also when do we rise and when do we go to bed?
And when do you invoke a daylight saving time and when do you end it? Because we have learned doing Zoom and trying to coordinate all that with our international community that it's all different times that you go on and off.
And we're in a state that doesn't recognize daylight savings time. So we're constantly having to.
We're in Arizona right now.
So yeah. So,
okay. Oh, interesting. So there's chat room questions.
There's lots of questions.
There's a lot to do.
Let's do the slideshow. Everyone, hold your questions. But we will. If you didn't answer them by the time we go through the presentation, we're welcome to come back to the questions at the end. And we always take questions in the second hour of the conversation.
And we're already there.
And boy, I tell you, Geert, we found plenty to talk about.
Yeah, I guess so.
We always do.
And whether we have a Zoom meeting or we're just sitting around drinking coffee or tea or something, this is what we do.
Our good German beer.
Good German beer. We haven't had German beer. Yeah. All right. Let's do the slideshow. I just remembered I'm in charge of the slideshow. 1 second here.
The spider.
It's like I gotta share.
I mentioned that because there's now a science project that they're finding even other animals sleep, right? We think our dogs sleep and dream, but they're finding even spiders, and they're saying that spiders could dream. They're making that conjecture because spiders act out. This one spider that has big eyes, and so it could get the light, and we can see its eyes move back and forth like REM. And so there's a conjecture we had to ask you about that. Yeah. So
that's interesting. I think many species can dream, and many species do have a sleep-wake cycle actually. But Okay, so one of the major questions is, why do we sleep? You already addressed it, and what you see here is a clock, and you see a man with one eye open and one eye closed, sleeping and being awake, which kind of contributes to our topic today. Let's go ahead. Put up the next. So the question was always, sleep is by the brain and or is it for the brain? And it's
Ah.
not by the brain. Of course, without the brain, we wouldn't do anything for the brain, and it's not for the brain, but it's for our complete organisms. Okay. So the interesting part about it is, for sleep medicine, how can we find out what is going wrong if sleep disorders are occurring, or how is sleep connected to other diseases and to our social life, to our cultural life, to all aspects of our life, to our memory. Yes, let's go on. So if we look at sleep, we can, and we have people going to the sleep lab, we can kind of evaluate the sleep, the polysomnography during the night, and we can do macro analysis, which is shown here. And what you see here on the top is wakefulness on the left side, and then the green is REM sleep, and N1 and N2 is light sleep. And way down is slow wave sleep, which is deep sleep. And you see then on the axis, you see the hours from 0 to 8 hours sleep. And you see that we have a cycle. And in the beginning, REM sleep is very little. And in the morning, there's much more REM sleep. In the beginning of the night, we have deep sleep. And in the end of the night, we don't have any deep sleep anymore. So let's go ahead. So the light sleep is 50% of the night. And what happens in sleep, when we go to sleep, temperature is going down.
Ah.
Way before we go to sleep, temperature is going down. And if we cannot reduce our temperature, we open our peripheral blood system circulation, and we give off heat from the hands, from the feet, from the, I don't know what is called, where the blood circulation is very, where we have a dense net of vessels. Um, that gives off heat, and our core kind of cools down. And one of the coolest things in 20 years ago was treating of insomniacs by putting on bed shoes, just opening the periphery and leaving off temperature. So the heart rate and breathing is slow. We have sleep spindles on the EEG, and we have memory consolidation in the light sleep. And the next one, yeah. So, and then N3, it's not very well to see. N3 is the slow wave sleep in the first half of the night. It's in the EEG, you see delta waves, very slow waves. This is why it's also called slow wave sleep. And it helps to restore declarative function, or to consolidate this declarative function. So REM sleep is in the second half of the night, and it's dreaming sleep, and it's an activated EEG. It's breathing and heart rate similar to the wake state, and it has low or no muscle tone at all. This is very important, and it's for learning and memory. So for consolidating learning and memory. Now you can go to the next one, so you can see what sleep does. And what we see with PSG, that is with polysomnography, is actually we can identify different states of sleep. The next one.
Oh, hold it, go back. Delta, and what else? What else are we seeing? Okay.
What else? Oh, in the awake state, we see alpha with eyes closed. In the stage 1, we see, in stage 2, we see K complex and spindles. And in stage 3, we see an intermingling of spindles and theta waves and some delta waves. And if it's more than 25% or 25 to 50% delta waves, then you have slow wave sleep. And in REM sleep, we have a similar spectrum as in wake sleep. But we have PGO waves, we have pontogenicular waves, and we have sawtooth waves that indicate this is REM sleep. So the next one. And what we do not see is if we do, for example, on the right side, you see this is scalp, on the scalp, and then you see surface EOG, and then you see implanted electrodes in the brain. And you see from the A panel to the third part in the A panel, from LFP implant, it's totally different waves if you hit another area. And this has brought sleep medicine very much forward by looking at what happens in EEG when you do, for example, in epilepsy surgery screening for with deep electrodes, brain electrodes. You see that different areas during sleep have totally different activity than what you see on the scalp.
Wow.
And this is the most important. And what we don't see actually, even in our EEGs, are these ultra fast ultra fast activity, which is important for the ultra fast changing of ultradian rhythms that are in milliseconds, like the changing of our red blood cells, or the changing or the reproduction of leukocytes, or what have you, whatever, or the epidermis, the skin, or other cells. So they act in a totally different, with a totally different component. And what we call, if you look at the left side, you see that there is the green is the circadian cycle. And the gray bars are sleep, and the white is awake. And what you see is during the circadian rhythm, it's down at night and it's high in the daytime. And then the blue is sleep. And sleep is measured by theta or delta activity. And the delta activity builds up during daytime and is reduced or depleted during nighttime. So actually what we do is we get to a point where when our circadian rhythm tells us, and our sleep depth or our sleep pressure tells us to go to sleep, then we go. And if we go to sleep, we have good sleep. So what we need to know is more about our sleep habits, that we really follow this internal rhythm. And most people, when I ask them, what do you think, how many hours do you sleep? They cannot tell you. They really are unable to tell you. Okay, so let's go on. This is the theory behind it. And then, of course, this is the brain, and on the left, during slow wave sleep, during deep sleep. And what you see are all these interconnections. It's a work done from fMRI, magnetic resonance, functional magnetic resonance imaging, and polysomnography. And you see that there are some networks are really, really dense, where other networks, the subcortical blue ones, there are just a few connections. So we have this, what we call the small world networks. And the small world networks function totally different in different sleep stages. Here I just show slow wave sleep. So you can imagine, if you train some of your networks to work in a certain way, that you do interconnectivity in between different points, between the limbic and the association and the cortex, you might learn to associate or to build networks in between your emotional experience and your conscious experience, and come back to your, let's say, to your inner self. Okay, just an explanation. And now just remember, we have these three states of consciousness: the wakeful state, the REM state, and the non-REM state. So, and these may overlap. And for example, if we have an overlap between wake and non-REM, then we can have the non-REM parasomnias, that you have a state where you are shut off from your consciousness, but you have movement and you have some experience, like those people who recall their dreams from non-REM, from sleepwalking, for example. They experience like somebody is in the room, somebody is aggressing me, there's something dangerous, or there's something strange, or I'm closed into a room and I look for the light, you know, and then they always seem to search for something. So it's a state in between where the frontal brain, the conscious brain, is shut off from the motor activity. And then you have the psychogenic dissociation, where you have fugue and different psychotic states, which are also overlapping. And then you have the overlap between wake and REM. And the overlap between wake and REM means you can have cataplexy, loss of muscle function. You can have these hypnagogic hallucinations. You can have sleep paralysis. Can have RBD is REM sleep behavior disorder. You probably can have lucid dreaming, or you could experience delirium, something very, very awful. And then you could have a third one. You see right in the middle, this is a mixture, a dissociated state in between wake, non-REM, and REM state. And we call that status dissociatus. Or we have overlap parasomnias, where you have features of non-REM parasomnia like somnambulism and REM sleep behavior disorder. Or you can have a status that is psychotic with dream hallucinatory components and components of consciousness. So there are all these states, and these states are driven, of course, by circadian influence, by influence certainly of neurodegeneration, and by processes that can be either caused by drugs. Hallucinatory drugs, for example, can do an overlap of these different states, or infection, trauma, anything that changes the brain function. Okay, let's do the next. Okay, here is an example from REM sleep behavior disorder. This is about acting out dreams in REM sleep. Why do we act out dreams in REM sleep? If you see the left graph, you see on the top level is EG. Then you have these lines running against each other. This is the eye movements in the second row, in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th and 6th row. And these curves run against each other, and this is rapid eye movement. And then you have the EMG, this is electromyography, the ECG, and then you have the flow, and on the lower part you have no activity in the legs. And on the right side you have the stages of REM sleep behavior disorder, and you see it's REM sleep from the 5th and 6th line where the red arrow is at. This is the first red arrow is REM sleep, the rapid eye movement, and you see on the second red arrow, you see that there's muscle activity in the chin muscles. And the third red arrow, you see that there is activity during REM in the leg muscles. And it's not always movement, it has to be severe electromyographic activity to cause a movement. So what we can say, okay, dogs have it, cats have it, to wake up against a predator, for example. And if you watch your dog or you watch your cat, you see them when it's screaming.
In your dream. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
So the question still unsolved is, why is it only in few nights? Why do these people have aggressive dream contents? Why? We still don't know that. What is activated from let's say, our ancient consciousness, where we had predators, where we had to fight against a predator. And why do these
Oh, a
people,
predator.
despite having that, no daytime consequence, no daytime sleepiness, no fatigue, nothing, no consequences, except maybe bruises because they jump out of bed and jump into the cupboard or whatever, the wall, or their wives have bruises or whatever.
Cave, yeah.
Okay, let's do the next one. So this is just a clinical example. Just go ahead. This other one is an explanatory explanation. Okay, so then we have some interesting findings, especially by the American group around Tononi, that we have, for example, in sleepwalking, a dissociated event, and we know that 75% of people may have ever once in a while have a dream recall of the sleepwalkers, and this hasn't been known for a long time because it hasn't been in the literature, and they do have excessive daytime sleepiness after one night of sleepwalking. So they have consequences because something makes them exhausted. Maybe it's a motor activity, and they cannot restore their motor system or the essentials that are necessary for the recovering their motor system. And of course, they do have a disturbed sleep-wake homeostasis, meaning their slow-wave sleep is always disrupted. And so the slow-wave sleep extends until the morning. And the prolocal events we know from animals, from whales, from other animals, from birds flying around with one half of the brain waking and one half of the brain not waking. We don't know that from the sleepwalkers, but we have one work that shows that the dissociation that is happening in the brain, and maybe the next slide. Oh, this is just a dolphin who has this, who can just jump around and still wake with half a brain. Next one. And in sleepwalkers, we have the evidence. Oh no, go ahead. Okay, from sleepwalkers, we have this evidence by MRI, and what we can see by functional MRI, that the frontal brain areas on C and D are deactivated, while the limbic system is activated, and the gyrus singly and the vermis are activated, which are in control of the involuntary movements. And so this may explain why the consciousness is shut off from the frontal brain, and the motor control is not shut off, at least that of the cerebellum.
Are you finding a correlation between whales that really have to come to the surface and breathe even when they're sleeping? So they have to be, some half of them has to regulate that, so the half of the brain is asleep, the other half is awake, and then they switch. Are you comparing sleepwalkers to that kind of function?
No, I wouldn't, but it's just an example. It's just an example in humans that there is a dissociation apparently, and we don't know what it is exactly. And we looked at the genes because we have sleepwalking running in families highly. 70% have a familiar background, that their ancestors, their mothers, fathers, or some of the relatives, or maybe even one generation behind, did have sleepwalking. So it's not a very strong genetic effect, but
How
it
many
is
people
a genetic
sleepwalk?
effect.
What is the percentage of the population, do they think? That
Well,
is
when the
usually-
cortex is not controlling in kids, is not at its perfection when they are young, 15% or 15% of all kids sleepwalk every once in a while until they get 15 years old.
Wow.
And in the adults, it's about 4%. And sometimes we don't know. Sometimes it starts off when people are even older, after their 20s or 30s, and it's mainly caused by alcohol, by sleep deprivation, or severe infections.
Interesting. Okay.
Next.
So it's a change in the circadian system, or in the arousal system. They have the change of the arousal system causes a triggering of sleepwalking or sleep terrors. Okay, we have then lucid dreaming. I think it's a concept that is quite old, lucid dreaming, and we know each one ever once has experienced something like, oh, I can kind of steer my dream, I can manage my dream, I can interfere with my dream, I can put it in a certain direction. It's amazing when you have that for the first time. It's really amazing. So if you're really into your dreams, then normally you have one of these experiences. So what is it? It's by Van Eden called it in 1913, reintegration of the psychic functions, that the sleeper reaches a state of perfect awareness and is able to direct his attention and to attempt different acts of free volition.
From 1913, this is,
And when you say reintegration, are we talking about maybe that this is a normal functioning aspect to dreaming that should occur more often? Like it's something that we really should have more access to?
It happens spontaneously. It's normal. It may not be common, but it's normal, right?
Yeah, it is a normal phenomenon, but you have to not, I think if you have to be open to your dreams. If you think your dreams are rubbish, forget it. I think you will never have it.
Interesting.
But it is extraordinary to wake up and realize I'm in a dream and I can see and I'm aware of it, right? I can direct it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
You know you're dreaming.
Yes.
And you're awake inside a dream.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, put on the next one. We go into a bit into the neurobiology. You can control the content of the dream. It's characterized by recovery of reflective cognitive capabilities associated with the reactivation of frontal and frontolateral brain. And these brain regions are those that are connected to consciousness, and to a certain kind of consciousness, as you will see. And it's a cognitive restructuring method which can be applied in the state of dreaming, and you can learn this technique. And this is very important for certain disorders, sleep disorders like or psychiatric disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, things like that, and has been used for behavioral therapy. Can you do the next one, please?
So if we ever want to go back to the lab and look at what happens in our hybrid state of the waking dream, this might be clues.
Yeah. So here are two parts of the neurobiology, and you see that clarity that one's dreaming is related to awareness of spatial orientation, clarity about the freedom of choice. Then you have the clarity of consciousness, the awareness of concentration, the clarity about the waking life. This is awareness of your own identity. I mean, you're not dreaming that you're someone else, but it's the awareness you are the one who's managing your dream, who's interfering with your dream. And it's the clarity about the meaning of the dream. So, and then of course, it's clarity of recollecting the dream. And sometimes you have this experience that you wake up from a dream and let's say you go to the toilet and your dream goes on, and this is also something where you're already in a first state of kind of going into a lucid dream. Okay, next one. And we can relate the dreaming to different cortical areas. And here you see the brain. And the frontal polar cortex is on the left side. It's processing internal states. It's responsible for decision making, for prospective and working memory. The point two, ventrolateral prefrontal cortex is regulating emotions, emotion regulation, action planning, decision, uncertainty. And point three is the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. It's responsible for metacognitive evaluation, higher order consciousness, working memory, selective attention, decision making. You see, all these are very much related to consciousness. And parietal cortex is focusing attention, information selection, neural integration, agency, semantic understanding, language processing, self-awareness, working in episodic memory. And the temporal parietal cortex in 5 is verbal memory, information, self-consciousness, and own body imagery. This is also very important for lucid dreaming and dreaming per se. And precuneus, the 6, is reflective self-awareness, mental imagery of the self, episodic memory, visual spatial imagery. And the cuneus, the 7, is reflective self-awareness, visual perception, visual processing and association. And the occipital temporal cortex is finally the cortex for visual perception, processing, and association, like when you're reading something or seeing something, and the perception of body parts and movement preparation. So you can see we can pretty well localize certain traits to certain areas or certain behavior or certain awareness to certain parts of the brain. And the more we do imagery, EEG, and kind of put both together and genetics, the more we, let's say, understand about the brain. Can you do the next one? And what this study has done, it did a comparison between frequent lucid dreamers and controls. And what could be shown on the functional MRI is that there was increased functional connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and temporal parietal association areas. And these areas are normally deactivated during REM sleep. So you can train your brain actually to perform something like REM sleep. And the next one shows you the next slide shows you what we think are the function of sleep and its transitions. And in the left model, A, you see that there is a transition from waking to non-REM, the green to REM, and then it goes back. And you have, for example, in the waking from REM to waking, you have high noradrenaline and serotonin. And when you are more into still sleep, you have high acetylcholine. And on the right side, you see that the states of diminished consciousness are expanding in this model, and they come closer to where you have lucid dreaming, and lucid dreaming is somewhere in between all these different states. So this is possibly one of the explanations that you are kind of intermingling the different sleep wakes just by learning or training your neural networks to act in a different way. And this is probably also the cause of the success of a therapeutic process in cognitive behavioral therapy. And the next one.
So it's all the gears, they're just syncing up in a different way to produce this different state. The same gears.
But you can train it. Yeah. You can train it. I mean, that's one lesson we have to learn. We can train our brain. It's not just we are the slaves of our brain, and it's not all given, but we can influence our brain regions. Like when you're taking drugs and you have this experience with drugs and you see everything very, very clear. You think, okay, my brain is doing that due to drugs, but I must be able, since my brain is performing this, I must be able to do it by myself.
Naturally. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay. And
That's
this
right.
is nothing different
Take
from
the
what,
steering wheel and drive the vehicle that our
yeah,
physical.
this is the
Yes.
same as what you're doing with your Kiva. And
Yes.
Yeah.
so
I,
the next shows something which is showing something. You see this red dot, and it's directly directing to the visual cortex in the occipital lobe on the right. This is a left graph. And if you take off serotonin, which is driving it, you have associated cortices, like other occipital cortex parts that relate to your imagery. So we have excessive accessory sensory areas in the brain that can replace some of the inputs, some of the memories, some of the inputs, the networks that produce imagery.
Not just
So if,
imagery though, but it seems like all of the senses, right? They're kind of can be cross-wired. You
yeah,
can have like all of your senses and more. They can
yeah,
be activated.
right.
Yeah.
I think we can leave off the next one. You can skip the next one, and I think we're at the end of the slides. Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That little
Okay.
spider
So I
traveling
think
with his rim. This was extraordinary. Actually they're watching the spider move just like a dog would move
Right.
his legs, and his eyes are moving.
Yeah.
So that's why
yeah.
they think even an insect can dream. And you wonder what imagery, what are they sensing, right? That's fascinating.
Now, and I want to take the conversation now to the next step. This has been absolutely fascinating, and
Can I ask a
but
question?
neuroscience is not for sissies. I mean, this is a lot of work. This is serious work and research and study. It's been a life study, and thank God you
It's
did
so
it.
complex.
So glad you did it,
Yeah.
not me. But yeah.
We each find our lane. Yeah, I
But
see what
I
he's
want to
saying.
follow up with the concept of shamanic trance states. This idea that, there's been lots of research done on Buddhist monks and meditation, on just different areas of how we can have, like you talked about, train the brain, that we can affect the brain, that we can have these altered states of experiences. And of course, with our work, we're looking at what kind of falls into the category of a shamanic trance state. So what I'm asking, Geert, is that, you had the opportunity to have a direct experience of what we do, but I know also you've participated and looked at research around the planet in terms of meditative states and all of that. Where does this all fit in? And we want to be encouraged that we can have, like you mentioned, without drugs, without outside agents, can we have an impact on ourselves to expand the capacity of how our brain works, how we interact with the world?
I think we can. I think if we put ourselves to a resting state, we have we get a better concept or an awareness for ourself, not ourselves, but ourself. I mean the concept of our personality and of our being in this world. And I think we have lost quite a bit of contact to it
Yeah.
because we are so occupied with the input from the outside, which is so diverse and which always occupies us, our minds, and we cannot clear our minds. So sleep does a clearance of misfolded proteins, and what we sometimes need is we have to do a clearance of misfolded outer inputs and get back more to ourselves. And what you actually do is in the Kiva, you do something, you activate a resting state by drumming. The drumming is at a beat and you sent me this article, I just scanned over it, but I thought it was very interesting because you can do it also with electromagnetic coils on the brain. You can induce certain brain activity and cause the brain to sleep better, to produce more slow wave sleep, to improve memory, to improve diseases. And your drumming which is regular, which is something like soothing, putting you down into a different state of consciousness. And you can do that by giving cues before going to sleep and priming these cues and giving memory tasks. So you can do this in a very different way. So, but it's a way to put ourselves in a resting state and to get access to our consciousness and to our. You said, you asked, is there unconsciousness? I don't know if there's unconsciousness. I don't think it's really unconscious,
Well, here's
but
the
it's
question.
something that's inherited, like genetic memory. Maybe I don't have a concept for that, but there must be something, like in REM sleep behavior, you have these aggressive dreams. Why do we have that? Because we had predators. That's the thinking behind it. So there is some encoded memory that's maybe DNA. I don't know. Probably, yes. And maybe this brings us back to ourselves, our self-concept. And I think the Kiva does something like that when you have similar experiences in some trance postures.
Yeah, yeah.
So you talk about there's a volition, there's an agency, right? There's an active participation in lucid dreaming that we're able to do. But I often have dreams or trance states where it feels like that is happening through some larger part of me, and that sometimes my conscious mind or my intellect, what I identify as me consciously, is just a subset of this larger. That sometimes, even in a trance state, you can, if you come in really tired, you can fall into a sort of like a sleep state.
A dream state.
It's really interesting. I invite you to do more investigations in this. There's a lot here to look at. But it's like a subset of trance. It's a subset of sleep. It's a hybrid state of even sleep. It's like you consciously know that there's a lot going on, but you're not aware of all of it, except that there's a lot more going on. And it feels like you have another agency. It feels like the you are still active, but the conscious mind's over here, and it's noting it, but it's not fully aware of it. It gets really interesting.
Don't hit that man.
So also in lucid dreaming, right? It feels like, well, this dream has been going on, and I'm an active participant in this dream. Some part of me has volition in this dream, is knowing what's going on, is participating and directing the dream. But the little me, part of me, is waking up and witnessing to something that's already ongoing. It's interesting. There's a larger part of ourselves, and I think that is what is activated or accessed by these various trance states, is that you're seeing a larger part of yourself that is in touch with more than we are in our narrow, with blinders on, waking state. I don't know. There's something. Something
coming
really
back to how Geert originally
order.
help us understand where this fits into that whole field, was the idea that there's sort of like a connection to a waking dream, that we have this element of experience that we're not in a sleep state, but we're not in a full-on awake state either. There's a waking dream. We have an element to pull that information forward. Yeah.
And how would you compare the trance state, the ecstatic trance state you were in with us, to your lucid dreaming? They're not the same.
Big question.
They're not the same, but they have,
No, they're not the same, because what you do actually in a trance state is it might be induced. For example, I could induce it when I was running. I was running, and then all of a sudden I felt I'm not running myself, but it is running me. And then all of a sudden I could solve problems I had postponed or taken with me for days, and all of a sudden, whoop, there was a solution. So it's a cognitive state. It enhances it. It's a resting state where I have access to a lot of solutions. different
Yeah.
solutions from what I have normally. And I know this from dancers. They have the same experience from your ecstatic postures, from people who do sports. You don't need
Like
to
the
have.
body's wisdom somehow. Yeah.
No, I think it's a state of mind where you open to different solutions, where you open up yourself for different solutions. And this is,
Be wider.
you have a different network. You open up to a different network. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very much coming from the brain system,
Yes.
also
Sure.
very much from the mystical part.
Yeah.
I try to explain it scientifically for myself.
Yes.
Is a term.
Encoding. Some people after stroke develop some brain areas are suppressed, and others all of a sudden pop up, and they develop capacities they never knew about before. They all of a sudden can write music, or they all of a sudden love something to eat which they have detested before. So it's just a different network that opens up by suppressing another network.
It seems like different neural connections are made, right?
Yeah.
In our waking state, we have some set of neural connections. In these alternate states, other connections happen and communication happens, and they're normal, not common perhaps in our society, but they're normal. The brain has the capacity to hook up in these various ways. The gears have a chance to sync up or shift and operate in these different ways. Yeah.
Well,
So that's important to just put this back into the mainstream of normalcy.
It's nothing abnormal. It's a possibility for a human experience. And I think whatever you do to have this experience, to have these insight, could be something mystical, could be something like, oh, I have a vision or something, and you think, oh, this is supernatural, but it's not supernatural. I think all these Catholic visions in the last centuries people have been occupied by religion, and they all of a sudden saw Madonna, Yeah, why not? Come on.
We have lots of questions to go to.
yeah. Well, and Tony made a great comment to me personally. He just said this discussion now is another whole conversation. We need to have Geert come back, and at some point we're going to start from this point on in the conversation, because this easily could be another whole realm of discussion. But the research that you've done on sleep disorders, there was a lot of questions regarding that from the very beginning. Some of them we probably have already covered. I don't want to repeat them, and I'm not going to have everybody turn their mics on. But Miriam said, I have a REM sleep disorder. I'd like to know, does lucid dreaming help? I've never heard anybody suggest that it can help, but she said 10 years of it with no Parkinson's.
No, you can have a cognitive behavioral therapy that uses sensory input, but it cannot help you against your the disease itself. It just can help you having less nights with massive action, motor activity.
And Bianca, who also is German, who also lives in New Mexico now, said, I'm wondering if detecting these early protein buildups can then assist with the prevention of Parkinson's or delaying the degeneration.
Yes, this is what we are right now into, and we've written several European and American applications, and there is a forum in the US which is specially dealing with these pre-Parkinson's features like REM sleep behavior disorder, and the Michael J. Fox Foundation is doing it too. And I think we're gonna get ahead and have medication very soon. And of course, what is very essential is to have sufficient sleep and to look very early into sleep problems and to treat sleep problems very early, always in a combination with cognitive behavioral therapy, or this is first line treatment, and then you can add some medications. So far the medications are not the best. Yeah.
So, and also build your immune system, right? Protect yourself from infections. You mentioned infection is one of those
If you
things
sleep
that,
well, you have better immune system.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I recommend
Yeah.
garlic and vitamin C as well.
Uh,
Okay.
Thank you for your recommendations.
Yeah, thank you.
And Tony said
Keeps the werewolves away
epigenetics.
as
He said,
well.
could you expand a little bit on epigenetics? Is that kind of a broad question?
Yeah,
To optimize
epigenetics. I
psychic
think
expression, right?
epigenetics mean you have environmental factors. And for example, if you have an epilepsy, you could kindle epilepsy. You could train the brain to like epilepsies and to produce more genes that early immediate genes that cause other brain regions to spread out the epileptic seizures. So we learned that genes can be primed by, for example, emotional inputs, by
Okay.
essential inputs. So we can, of course, we have a fundamental set of genes, but then we have these early genes that you can train to act in a different way. And this is how some diseases are increasing much more than they should, because we learn, well, we train the system by repeating that this is good for the brain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My father took power naps every afternoon.
That was the next question.
He would come home. He had his den. He had his space. He would lie down at like 2 or 2:30, sleep for half an hour, wake up. And this man was clear as a bell, lived a
Very
healthy,
long, healthy life. He always would say that
Money in the bank is how he described it.
A nap in the afternoon is like money in the bank. Yeah.
Okay, that's it. Yeah, sure.
That's the answer.
If you can sleep throughout the daytime, 60 minutes of sleep, and you have memory consolidation.
Very nice.
So if you need it, it's healthy and it's a good practice for many.
It's a good practice. Yeah, if you can.
He had like a second win, you know.
And then Dory asked a really good question. That is that her and her husband cannot sleep without taking something like an Ambien or whatever. But she's worried about the effects on the REM sleep.
What are some natural sleep aids?
Yeah. Well,
there are actually no natural sleep aids indeed, except you have to increase your sleep pressure. That is something like sleep. First is sleep hygiene. You go to bed at same times. You don't increase your temperature by working out before going to sleep. You don't take big meals prior to sleeping. You have a bedroom that is rather silent, that is dark enough, and it's kind of inviting you to fall asleep. This is sleep hygiene. Then you could do something. You could do a sleep log and kind of find out how many hours do I sleep, just by putting in your subjective sleep time. And then you take the mean of that, like you're sleeping 5 hours, then you take the mean of 5 hours and you reduce sleep to 4.5 hours. So you decide, I'm a late type person, late go to bed person. From 12 to 4:30, you can sleep. And then you build up a sleep pressure. And every time you sleep more than 85% of this time, you can increase your sleep by 15 minutes. And then you have to be stable for, let's say, 3 nights. And then you can increase again if you fill in 85%. And people don't sleep very much more than they perceive, but they sleep less fragmented, they fall asleep much faster, and they feel recovered. They have a recovery.
The quality of your sleep.
The quality of the sleep, yeah. They feel refreshed in the morning. So these and then of course, if people are ruminating and stuff like that, you can do cognitive behavioral therapy. And actually from the medication, so far there is all the medications like the Z substances, zopiclone, zolpidem, and Citalopram and Rameltion and what have you, they're not really improving your sleep that much, because if you take them off, you have sometimes a rebound. So the latest is you substitute orexin antagonists, dual orexin antagonists, and it's already approved in the United States. It's something, orexins are controlling your sleep-wake system without many side effects. So it's like a natural influence on your sleep-wake system.
Could you type that in the chat room for us? Okay, 2 questions. Weighted blankets are very popular. I love mine.
Weighted blankets?
Weighted blankets.
Weighted,
yeah.
and they have extra
actually
weight,
have,
so they're heavier.
Like they're 25 pounds a blanket.
Why?
I don't know. It just feels really cozy. It's like, I don't know. It's kind of another application of another kind of pressure.
Paul is better than the weighted blanket.
That's true. It's true. It's not always available. The other thing is, very nice.
What?
You're an assignment, man. The other question is, a friend of mine had a baby, and she showed me what she found to really help her baby sleep. Okay, as a toddler. Okay. And she put on this little video, and it was so darling. It was all these little baby animals yawning. So you'd have cats yawning, dogs yawning, all these animals yawning. And pretty soon you started yawning too. And then you start to get very drowsy. And she said, I put that on for my 3-year-old, and man, they're down, right? Because it's contagious. Yawns.
It's a social reflex. Yawning causes a social reflex that you start yawning too. We don't know where it comes from, but if you watch animals, you see that when one starts yawning, the others start yawning too. So it's maybe some social reflex prior to going to sleep. I don't know, but it's very interesting. Yeah, I think it's nice.
And it was so darling to see baby animals, little baby furry animals yawn, and that would capture the attention of a 3-year-old, right? And then it was effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can also take your child and put it to sleep and co-sleep for 10 minutes until it falls asleep, and then go off. The same effect. And many mothers just put their have their kids stay up much too long until they're getting really naughty, and so they do the false sleep hygiene. And sometimes it's so simple, and you think, why do we need all those extra apps and stuff like that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just the skin contact or the physical contact, and not the TV that's doing it. Sorry to say, but that is my opinion.
We're programmed for this by nature, right?
And how about the question from Bobby is theta states? What about theta states?
Yeah. Theta waves. What about the theta waves?
And because it's also called mystical theta.
Yeah.
As an altered state of experience.
We see that in the labs. We see beta and theta in our work. So theta naturally comes spontaneously.
But I think all these looking at the EEG was a form of form. Mm-hmm. It's now you have to integrate functional MRI, and maybe the EEG can tell you something where the activity goes, but you have to have a solution that is spatial over the brain, and not just at one point of the brain. So, and when we look at, and this is why I showed the dissociation in the brain, the different areas that act differently. If you just do the surface, you don't know what's happening in the depths. We can only go about 0.5 centimeter down with the scalp electrodes. So this is, for me, this is not
the full picture.
Not a method that is really reliable anymore.
And in what circumstance were they putting electrodes in somebody's brain to get that data? That they had to have electrodes for some other purpose, and then they
pre-epileptic surgery is looking, where is the origin of the epileptic dysfunction? So And if you want to remove part of a brain, you need to know, is it essential? Is it your language or whatever? And you need to know, if I take it away, it must be reproducible from the same area. Mm-hmm. So this is why you put deep brain electrodes on. And this is in patients with severe epilepsies, or sometimes in temporal epilepsies, you can put an electrode here, a deep electrode through the face, and you can record where it's coming from, and they have very good success, excellent success, and we know the earlier the better. So this is when you do it, and then by chance, if you look at some other paradigms like memory, like emotion, stuff like that, and you can correlate that with the scalp electrodes or with imaging, it's perfect. Then you can really move ahead.
And talk about electrodes in the brain. Paul, do you want to mention this news report?
Yeah, well, Elon Musk, of course, with Tesla, started a company called Neuralink, and they're looking at a brain interface, some kind of implant, a microchip in the brain.
So you can always be connected to the internet?
They're saying that it has health benefits. You can kind of keep track of the brain's activity. It's treating. It also can help people with spinal cord injuries and that kind of stuff. But there's also some other applications that are more.
Of course, you can put advertisement in the brain of the people and make them buy stuff. Come on,
buy Tesla, buy Tesla, buy Tesla.
Yeah. Go to the moon, pay 10 millions to go to the moon or to the orbit. Come on, forget it. You know, it's like the people looking at their active watches and say, I don't have enough slow wave sleep. Come on, forget it.
Yeah.
Develop your own inner capacity first.
Right.
Work with nature. Yeah.
Tony has his hand up. He wants to ask a question in person here. Hi, Tony.
Turn on your mic.
He's got it. His mic's on. Well, it went back off again. You must have clicked it twice, Tony.
Okay. Well, am I okay now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, there's so many really good questions. I hate to take your time on that, but one thing I need to ask about. My sleep at night, I'm often solving problems, often of a scientific nature, and it's rather like Sisyphus. I always run up to can't get there, and it goes back over and over again. If I take a nap in the afternoon, like Laura's father, and I usually limit it to about 20 minutes, sometimes I have a very deep sleep and all sorts of just really comfortable feelings, no tension. It's a whole different thing. And I'm wondering, is that normal, this dichotomy?
Well, it's absolutely normal. And you should probably not take these problems with you at night. You should write them down. You should write them down before you go to sleep and just put them on your table and then go to sleep, and just don't do all of your questions. Just do one or two questions. And then maybe you will solve it in your dreams. Many scientific problems were solved in sleep or by inducing a resting state.
I would say all my greatest discoveries have come that way.
Great, wonderful.
Yeah.
Listen, I have so many questions. Maybe I could write you, or maybe you'll come back on.
Ask another.
No. Other people have wonderful questions.
Maybe we should have an open discussion round, I would say.
Yeah. And Tony's also on the advisory committee along with you, so we can also do an advisory committee conference at this point, just a Zoom thing. We'll get together.
Solve some of the questions.
Sure.
Go ahead, Tony.
Okay, one of the things that really interested me was your comment on light and the color of light, something that's happening universally. We're shifting to diode light. Generally, this has a much bluer color temperature. And this is being used for street lighting and all sorts of things like that, headlights of cars. This means the ambient light going up into the sky at night is bluer. And since light is scattered inversely with the fourth power of wavelength, it means that we have much more scattered light, not so dark skies anymore. I'm wondering how this will affect us. And you mentioned how the change of the lens, our lens in our eye is affecting us. What can we do to to take care of ourselves in the evening, given that the color temperature is more like midday that's happening at night now. It's well-meaning. People think, oh, this is so much more efficient than sodium vapor or incandescent. You get more lumens per watt. We're doing good things for the environment, but we are really screwing up the night sky.
Well,
This is right.
but we're adding more daylight at the wrong hour, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yes, but the thing is, the industry already reacted, and they took out the blue spectrum from the screens of our laptops, of our TVs, of our cell phones, and things like that. So I think they already reacted, and there was something. For example, VW had the what do you call it? The where you see your speed and stuff like that. The information panel had it in bright blue light to wake you up at night, but they stopped it.
Well,
They
I'm
took
going
some
to
other
agree with
color.
you. I'm going to agree
Pardon?
with you about that, but still, street lighting, car lighting, ambient lighting.
Yes, but then the
that's all
intensity
around
is,
us.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it's not enough. It's not enough. I don't think the light intensity is not enough to really make us sleep shorter, to influence our circadian system.
I
But-
will
Well,
say
it's good
that
to hear that.
Tony has alerted us to the threats to our dark skies. We live in a dark sky community. It is glorious to see the arm of the Milky Way overhead on a regular
Geert has
basis.
visited us.
And yeah, Geert, you saw that Milky Way with us. And,
Yeah.
and it's very special to go to dark sky locations, even darker, right? In the middle of the outback, or Bryce Canyon is my favorites. And so Tony, based on your recommendation, we have invited John Ballantyne of the International Dark Sky Association to talk to us. He's coming up, I think, in September.
Okay.
And we're going to discuss this issue and what we can do to even protect our own localities to the best of our abilities.
Yeah,
So
I had
thank you
not
for that,
thought of
Tony.
I had not thought of this as possibly affecting sleep, and I'm glad that Gert feels that it will not have effect on that. But there are predictions that there'll be many places on Earth that nobody will see stars anymore in as soon as
Right,
a decade
right.
from now.
But you know, in Europe, they cutting down all the lights on official monuments, on
Unnecessary lights.
on street lights, etc., due to the energy crisis.
Oh.
So it's a good thing. We have dark skies. I think we will have darker skies in the future, and it's a good thing. Environmentally
Except for
spoken,
speaking of Elon Musk, he's deploying, Tony, do you want to address this? All these satellites in the sky for.
I know, terrible. And he wanted to light up the sky even more. Right now, we have a drought in Europe and in other countries, and the sun is blasting all day long. It's terrible. I mean, we need some changes.
Thank you, Tony.
Well, if I could just say on Elon on Starlink, there are a lot of them going up. I happen to know that they're in the process of acquiring material for 8,000 more satellites, and then there are several other companies in the U.S. and Europe that are doing exactly the same thing. So there will be a time, not too distant future, where a child will look up and ask, "What are those things that are still in the sky, not the ones that are streaking across?"
You can answer, wait till it falls upon you.
The Chicken Little thing. I will say that one of my associates knows Elon and sees him weekly, and Elon is trying to make the bottom of his satellites dark so they'll be less visible. So he's at least conscious of that.
Good.
Yeah.
Good job.
And Elon, if you're watching, you're welcome to join us anytime, and we'll give you counterpoint opportunities to
Explain yourself fully.
Hey, look out! He might
debate with Tony one-on-one.
He would enjoy this. Yes.
All right, Miriam.
Last question.
Miriam
go
has
ahead.
her hand up.
Go ahead, Miriam.
Yeah.
Hello.
My doctor's really pushing clonazepam since I had a concussion a few weeks ago because I had one of those states where you got sleep paralysis, and because of the REM disorder, I wasn't paralyzed and I threw myself off the bed really hard and I got a concussion. And a few weeks earlier, I picked up a really heavy lamp and threw it in my sleep. So he really wants me on clonazepam. I really don't want to be on clonazepam, and I'm wondering what you think about it in general, because there's so many horrible side effects.
Well, I dislike clonazepam because it gives you a hangover. It can give you a hangover and memory impairment. So what I recommend in first line presently is melatonin, always taken at the same time. We don't know the exact dosage, but it should be somewhere in between 3 and 5 milligrams. And the most important is you have to always take it at the same time. It should be half an hour to 1 hour before your desired sleep time, go to bed time. But it should be always the same time because it's a circadian medication. It works well in jet lag, but you have to take it always at the same time.
I take 10 milligrams. I've been taking it for years.
You have been taking always same time?
Well, more or less. No one ever said that, but
right. Yeah, but this is a secret about it.
Okay.
Because you want to set the body's circadian rhythm, right? So I have one last question.
Thank you, Miriam.
And good luck. You know, these disorders are real, and as we just heard from Miriam, they're impacting people's lives.
Yeah.
And so thank you for the good work that you and all your colleagues do on this, and thank you for encouraging us to get good sleep. When you talk about misfolded proteins in the brain that seems pathological, isn't that just the spent metabolites? I mean, isn't this just the normal? All of us are throwing off spent metabolites that need to be cleaned out. It's not just a misfolded.
It's normal, but you have to have certain, it's mainly slow wave sleep where it's lymphatically depleted or where it's cleared. So you need to have enough of a certain type of sleep phase. So this is why the quality of sleep is so important.
And I think even the auto-suggestion of wanting to remember your dreams, wanting to enter into a lucid dreaming state, wanting to enter into that larger sphere, that is an auto-suggestion. You talked about these, that we can train our brains even by being receptive, you said, being respectful to this, preparing for this, honoring this. So I think there's a lot we can do to self-direct this. And my last question is, what questions do you wish, do you want to have answered about, what are the questions you would like most to answer in your field? What do you see in the future that?
Well, I would like to have a translational aspect that the scientific research is much more supported for this area, and that it is, let's say, more or less without boundaries to what scientists sometimes call, oh, this is mystical or this is psychological, forget about it, you know. What I learned is when I started out from psychoanalysis, which is interpretation of what happens in your brain. It's just interpretation based on social backgrounds and social experience or psychological experience. Now we have a fundament where we can relate it to changes within the brain. And I think this needs the neurobiological mechanisms should be, or the research in these neurobiological mechanisms should be supported in a much broader way. And people should learn how to translate these findings, which normally takes even for doctors 8 years to be informed. When I was talking about orexins, still many doctors don't know what orexins are. So I think this should be brought to a broad population and in a way that is scientifically sound, and it should be supported much more by funding.
And even the flow state, you know, it's nice to know when we enter into these normal, natural states of concentration but relaxation. That's another state where you're focused but you're relaxed, right? Flow state, and how beneficial that is, and how you can slip into that time. It's an hour goes by, but it feels like 5 minutes, that state. So we can appreciate these and cultivate these states that are so healthy and healing and enjoyable and creative and wonderful states to be in. I mean, we can navigate, we can take the wheel and navigate our physiology.
Right. We have the power. We have the power to use our brain not only for passive things, but to kind of get in charge of our brains again.
I mean,
And that's wonderful self-empowerment.
I mean,
right?
and that
That's
really, we feel like
optimizing
that's the, I'm
ourselves.
sorry,
Go ahead.
That's the foundation of this institute. That's what we do at this institute. We're trying to understand.
Right.
One of the key things you said today really sparked me was you said from the tribal cultures, they share their dreams. It's very important. And I realized that one of the steps that Dr. Goodman put within the practice of ecstatic trance postures is we always share the experiences, and we allow people that time to share their dream state experience, their alternate state of experience, and
how much
and integrate
insight
that. Yeah, so
and
it's
self-knowledge
Yeah.
and lessons in life come through that
That's true.
in the sharing.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary.
So, Geert, you are amazing. We'll always enjoy
Thanks.
spending time with you, and we look forward
I
to you
enjoyed
back.
having the time with you.
Okay, beautiful. Be well. Travel safe. See you soon.
Okay.